So these guys are three of the Enlightenment philosophers that were the most heavily relied on by the Founding Fathers. This book called The Origins of American Constitutionalism, political science professors said, where did the founders get their ideas? They looked at 15,000 writings from the founding era. They found all the quotes, they tracked it back. The number one most cited source in the Founding Fathers was this, The Spirit of Laws by Montesquieu. Okay. So this guy is a Christian French philosopher. The second most cited source was Blackstone's Commentaries, an English philosopher, 4-volume set. This is 1 volume of it. And the third most cited source was John Locke, particularly Spirit of the Laws. This goes back to 1690. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing about John Locke is today he is considered to be one of the deist philosophers. I have here a book from John Locke.
And can I clarify too for the audience really quickly? A lot of people who aren't necessarily, hobbyists with this, the term deist is often applied to Founding Fathers to separate them from Christians, where they say, well, they believed in an idea of God, but not necessarily the Judeo-Christian God. And I think that also deist has changed, and our view of what a Christian might be today has changed. So I just want to clarify for people who may not know, because I know
that's a great point. Deist at the time of the Founding Fathers, by definition, meant someone who believed in the Scriptures, believed in God. They had questions about the divinity of Jesus. That's all it was. That was it. A deist today is one who believes in the clockmaker philosophy, that there is a creator out there somewhere and he wound up the universe like a clock, but he's taken off and it just runs on its own natural law. If you pray, he's not going to answer. He doesn't get involved. Yeah. Today, if you look up the word deist in thesaurus or any other source, you'll find that synonyms are atheist and agnostic.
Right.
So it really has come to be a non-God guy is really what it was.
Right.
Back at the beginning, a deist just simply meant you believed in God, Jesus, the Bible. You just weren't sure Jesus was divine.
Right.
So it was a doctrinal issue rather than a God issue.
Right.
So great point. Today's writers say that John Locke was a deist, that he was a secular Enlightenment guy. He didn't have a great belief in God. So what I have here is a book that he did. It's called The Commonplace Book of the Bible. A little hard to see. Sure. This is all the scriptures out of the Bible that deal with the Trinity or the divinity, this is all the major doctrines of Christianity,
right.
And it's John Locke. So if they say he's a secular Enlightenment guy, they're crazy because he's got writings like this. As a matter of fact, this one that I showed you, this is the most cited book by the Founding Fathers when they were writing the Declaration of Independence. One of the signers of the Declaration, this guy, if I can point to him right here, this guy here is Richard Henry Lee. He's the guy that actually made the motion for America to become an independent nation. That's what led to the 4th of July was his motion.
Right.
He said they copied the Declaration out of this book. That was his term. This book, John Locke, references the Bible more than 1,500 times. So when a political philosopher says, they quoted Enlightenment philosophers, therefore they were secular, that proves to me they don't have a clue what they're talking about. They're running on rhetoric.
If anyone today, if any senator, congressman, or president were to cite it, how many times did you say that he referenced it?
1,400.
If anyone were to do that today upon swearing in, they'd be considered a radical extremist and hauled out in cuffs. So,
they would be accused of establishing a theocracy somewhere. They're trying to get an Ayatollah in or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know about the fatwas, but the principle remains. No, I understand what you're saying, and I do think that it's interesting because even if someone, and we'll get to that, question the divinity of Christ. By the way, you could refer to all Muslims as deists in that sense because they did question the divinity, at the very least, the resurrection. That doesn't matter so much here when we're discussing people who were creating laws and a system of government pragmatically because they needed to extrapolate those from somewhere, whether they believed that Christ was resurrected and actual God in the flesh or not. And I think people need to understand that because it changes the context of the laws we have and where they come from.
Well, not only does it change the context, but even if you take those who question the divinity of Christ, out of the 56 signers of the Declaration, there's really only 2 we know who question the divinity of Christ. That's Franklin and Jefferson. Now, here's the deal. If I go to a university, Duke University Law School, Southern University Law School, I'll put this picture up and I'll always ask, who up there can you identify? Call them by name. Tell me who you got. Everybody will get Ben Franklin. Everybody will get Thomas Jefferson. I go, that's 2 out of the 56. Well, 54 more.
Franklin's easy because of the glasses and something to do with a kite.
A kite, and that's a lot of fun too. That's a different story, a different thing. And we get into the scuba flippers that he invented that went with that, and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So, but what you get is these 2 guys are the only 2 to question the divinity of Christ, and they're the only 2 that people know today. Mm-hmm. And so they say, they were deists. Well, they were by definition of their day. Although Jefferson if you called him a deist, he would argue with you. He called himself a Christian several occasions. Franklin one time said he was a deist, and that's in his autobiography. And 2 pages later, he says, I was, but I'm not, because he essentially said it's the most foolish, the most silly belief of thought out there. Yeah. So within 2 pages, he renounces deism, but professors still quote that one quote from Franklin, not paying attention to the rest.